There is no hood like parenthood. Hi, I'm Kanika Chadda Gupta. I'm a former CNN journalist, mom of three, including twins, and host of That's Total Mom Sense, the podcast. Now, if I had $1 every time I heard, gee, you have your hands full. On my show, I interview change makers on their life lessons, legacy, and superpower of intuition, which I call our mom sense and dad sense. I've had the privilege of working with Mom 2.0, March of Dimes, and the White House, and have had some pretty amazing parents on my show.
Hey, what's up? I'm Kelly Rowland.
Hi, this is Chelsea Clinton.
It's me, Bobbi Brown. Can't wait to share my story.
That's Total Mom Sense is a production of the Evergreen Podcast Network. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube so you never miss an episode. To join my tribe, visit that'stotalmomsense.com and follow me on Instagram at Kanika Chadda Gupta. Now let's dive into today's episode. Sometimes in life, you find someone who's lived a very parallel life and understands you to your core. And I have found one such person. Today, I'm interviewing Angela Chee. She is a television anchor, podcast host, and author who has cemented herself in media in all its facets and is giving back by teaching others to find their voice. Angela is a media communication coach, author of The Power of the Only, Own Your Voice, Thrive in Any Environment, and podcaster, a former TV news anchor and reporter with 20 years of media experience. She's worked with top stations from LA to San Diego and has hosted shows for E! Entertainment and HGTV. She helps her clients own their only and be you amplified, clear, confident, and connected on camera and off, and just step into their leadership. Angela is a trusted keynote speaker, MC, and has given talks at Microsoft, Cisco, Intel, and JP Morgan Chase. Angela, welcome to That's Total Mom Sense.
Oh, it's such a joy to talk to you and your community. We've been waiting for this.
Yes, yes, it's so wonderful. I want to share how you and I met. It
Yes.
was at Maker's Circle, which was such a wonderful, idyllic, intimate experience of women thought leaders coming together.
Yes.
And we were in Newport Beach, which is like the most beautiful backdrop. And I was giving a talk on motherhood, and I had opened with the fact that I had two major goals in life. Number one, to be a television anchor, and number two, to be a mom. And I quickly found, which when we delve into your story, it's just so similar, that breastfeeding is not conducive to breaking news. And so I just was like, I got to pivot. I got to figure something else out in this long trajectory that is media.
Yes.
But yeah, I want to start there because you too had this like goal in life that I'm going to be on TV.
Yes. Well, it was such a special time to meet you. That was a very special moment with very special women and leaders. But yes, I always wanted to be on TV. Can you believe that? Like, a lot of people say, and it's like, where did that come from, right? I know you have that inside you too. There's just something that but I remember the moment, and I was 8 years old, and I grew up in the suburbs of Los Angeles, and every night we would gather around the TV, and my dad said, "Hey, you could be like Connie Chung." And I looked at him
Yeah.
and I was like, "What?" And so, seeing there wasn't a lot of representation, and, I talk about being the only. I've always been the only one. But at 8 years old, I didn't really understand, but I did understand seeing someone that looked like me. And that kind of ignited this fire inside me or actually, I think when I was younger, it was more of a seed. And then as I got older, it kind of became the fire.
Ooh, yes. And you actually worked at the same station that Connie Chung worked at. So life came full circle for you.
I know. We skipped the hard parts in the middle, right? Maybe we'll get
Yeah.
to that later. But but I mean, I kinda can't believe it myself, right? Because writing this book, I had to flash back to those moments, but I do remember that moment when I saw her for the first time. And then, yes, 19 years later, I became a reporter at KCBS, Channel 2 News in Los Angeles, and then my dad could watch me on the TV every night, and so that was a magical full circle moment and probably the biggest accomplishment of my life at that time. I was 27 years old, so it was truly magical, but yeah. But then there's a lot of parts in between, right?
Yes, yes, and I wanna get into it because, we had similar upbringings, being the product of immigrant parents. I actually
Yes.
immigrated with my parents when I was 2 from India. So, it's something that, I know you and your family can relate to. But same thing for us. We, would gather around and watch, like, the news religiously.
Oh,
And
wow.
I felt like same thing. I didn't see any representation, no Indian, journalists
Yeah.
on air. But yeah, we just respected the fact that they were household names, whether it was Connie Chung, Diane Sawyer, Barbara Walters, Peter
Yeah.
Jennings. Like, these were our thought leaders growing up.
And I love journalism. I know that the world has it just saddens me so much, but the hardworking journalists that I see out there, and I see a lot of good ones that are just working so hard. And I think our world has gotten more fast paced, but we need to get back to storytelling and
Yep,
people that tell the news that are, we were respected. That's why I went into the news. In my community, I volunteered, I did things. There was a certain standard that you live by. It wasn't just about being on TV. It was about telling their stories, understanding people and being a pillar for the community. And I think it's so important and we need to keep that while still understanding social media and video and fast paced stuff. But I think, when I meet kids that still want to go into journalism, I'm like, you go, you do it because it's important.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, I want to double click on all of that. So, tell us about growing up in an Asian household and being the product of immigrant parents.
Oh, you know what? I love it so much. I mean, if you would have asked me when I was little, I probably wouldn't have said the same thing, but it really shaped who I am, what I believe in. And that's why I believe, we talked about the power of the only. It really is that being the only is not a weakness, it's your greatest strength. And I think it came from having that immigrant, very simple background. So my parents immigrated from Taiwan in the 70s, moved to DC, this young couple in their 20s, they just got married. And my aunt says, "You need to move to America." My dad says, "Okay." And my mom, meanwhile, has this nice government job. They just, started their lives. And she's like, "What?" And so he came first and he was going to start these management programs and do all these things. But then when she came over shortly after, they had me. And so he became a waiter. And so, I mean, he was, ASB president of his university, very outgoing. I know I got some of my traits from both of them, but they had to kind of, erase all that, right? So my dad was a waiter. He worked in the service industry most of his life. And I talk about that in, my book a little bit about how I could hear the garage door open at like 11 or midnight when he would come home and I wouldn't see him in the morning because 'cause he'd be sleeping. But but they built a whole new life. But then we moved to California because my mom says, "It's too cold." And so I ended up growing up in Southern California, even though I was born in Washington, DC, but, typical immigrant story, and I grew up in the suburbs of Los Angeles. My dad and mom worked really hard. My mom worked at a bank, and we built a really good life, but I was, often, like, the only Asian girl in the neighborhood, even though I grew up in the suburbs of Los Angeles. I wasn't in some small town, but in the suburbs, it was different.
Yes, yes. Oh my gosh, I completely relate. I mean, I remember I would run home from the bus and this is like middle school now, but watch GH and then Oprah. you know?
I'm a little older, a little bit, but it's just, some of my things were very retro, like a lot of the shows. I was a very 80s, late 80s, TV kid, oh gosh, when VH or you or like VH1 or when videos first came out, I remember Richard Blade, like watching that, but just all kinds of shows that I was really, really into pop culture.
Yes, yes. I love that we had music videos and like TRL, it's just now,
Totally.
do musicians actually, produce music videos? Like, do they have to? Yeah, so it's so interesting how we had that. Yeah, I completely understand what you meant about feeling othered and like the only, because if you are raised in a neighborhood that's not diverse, it's just it really, I don't know, it's like so blatant, the the disconnect that's there. And I feel it. I feel it. I think it's like, when I think back to when my sister was growing up, she went to a much more diverse school because she got into a magnet program.
Mm.
And that's when she first saw other Asians and those from other cultures. And I was like, wow, she has a completely different experience than I did,
Oh,
thinking,
interesting,
how come
right?
I'm not a cheerleader or a jock or have blonde hair and blue eyes, you know? So, yeah. And you know what? So her best friend, Rose, is Chinese, and they would call themselves dumplings and samosas. And
Oh my gosh, that's so cute. And I think back then, no one would even know. I mean, it seems so common now, right? You have it at Trader Joe's, people eat it, they love it, but back then, people would be like, "What are dumplings and samosas?"
yes. Yes. And now we have to just schedule a lunch when you come here and have dumplings and samosas in New York.
But I mean, even though, my friends, I grew up even though I was the only one, I did fit in, but I think I hid parts of myself, and I think that's the difference, is that kids were nice. I mean, I've had my fair share of incidents, right? But overall, I had a very lovely childhood, but I think I protected myself, right? I knew how to navigate those environments, and I wasn't as free and open as I could be. I don't think I felt that at the time, but now looking back, there's layers to how much we reveal about ourselves. And I'm fully in who I am. I'm fully Chinese. I'm fully Southern California. I own all that. But, I'm in midlife now, right? It was layers and layers of peeling back. And even in, the peak of my career, I would say I hid parts of myself as well as college, but not in a, but I didn't realize it at the time.
Right, 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 right. Yeah. And I think, we needed the world to catch up a little bit.
Yeah.
And so now it's now that things are the norm, we're like, okay, I don't have to like explain away, which is great. You are also a pageant girl. This is something.
What was your time? Wait, yeah. What pageants did you do?
Oh my gosh. So I did the Indian centric ones. So I was a Miss India Maryland, and I won first runner up for a nationwide one. So I was Miss India East Coast. There was Miss India America, East Coast, West Coast. Yeah, and I performed. It was a classical dance, kuchipudi. It's like an ancient art form, and so I performed that. But I think one thing I really, really loved was the Q&A. And I remember all my like pageant mates were just like, "Oh my god, I am shaking in my boots. I am so worried about this interview." And I was like, "I actually love that section. It's the one time that we don't have to sashay and worry about our heels and, if you messed up your talent, it's like it's literally like you have the mic and you get to express yourself and your opinions, and now you have personality." And I was like, you want
Yeah, you're like,
everyone in
bring
the
it on.
audience.
Ask me anything. I'm
Yes,
here for it.
yes, yes.
And that
It's like, let's just expose that. Everybody has one. So, yeah.
And
Is
that's
that
what
how you feel?
that's why you do different things, whether it's pageants or something else. It's like tapping into, you don't know until you do it. So I wouldn't call myself a pageant girl, which is really interesting, is because same thing, it was TV. I think I was sitting at home. It was teen. I did the teen pageants. Remember when teen
Ah,
pageants were
yes.
televised?
Huge.
Do you remember when
Yes,
they were
yes.
televised and they came out in these cute clothes and they did these dance routines, and then but the one I did specifically was Miss California National Teenager, and it was based on scholarship. And my parents didn't have a lot of money. I was like, I want to do that, what they did on TV, but I also want to earn some scholarship money. And I looked at the application, and this is when you had to mail in things and get like things. There was no online. And it said grades. It looked at your grades. It looked at interview, and the one an evening gown, and the one I didn't have bathing suit because I was like, "No, I don't wanna do that," and it didn't have talent. You wanna hear something funny? I don't have talent. You know why I don't have talent? Because my parents are Chinese immigrants, and I didn't get to go to dance class. I didn't get to go
Mm,
I'm the opposite, actually. A lot of parents, they say, "Oh, they make their kids play piano." My parents were like, "We don't have time for any of that," right? And so it
right.
was
And it's
interesting. So as
expensive.
I got older, anytime I saw something, can I win something? Can I enter something? Can I learn something? I was always that person that wanted to learn and do more, but my parents were simple and they're like, just study, right? Just study. I'm like, I'm going to be, class president like you, dad. And it's like, just study. And I was like, well, I'm going to play sports. They're like, just study. And I kept doing the things. And after a while, they just kind of said, whatever, I'll let you do it. And so I'm like, I want to be in a pageant. They said, what? I'm like, "Well, I'll raise money. It only costs this much." And it was based on scholarship and all that. And so I think it was a beautiful experience because it wasn't like now, it wasn't, the girls, there were teenage girls, they were all super nice. Some of them weren't so nice, and that's why you learn how to navigate environments. But for the most part, it was like really wholesome. And I had no idea I would win. It was more, and this is where I talk about the limiting barrier. I'm Chinese. So I'm like, maybe, I have good grades. I know how to talk. I had done speech competitions. I'm all, maybe I'll make the top 10. Like I was just shooting, but I didn't shoot for winning. Isn't that
Yes,
funny?
it just was
I just I
unfathomable,
was
I
like, "There's
guess.
no way
Yeah,
I would win," right? This is
yeah.
California, I'm Asian, and it wasn't a bad thing. I just knew that I wanted to do this. I'm going to do this. I met all the requirements, but even back then, I think about it, I have the limiting belief, and the funny part is when I won, when I made a top 10 and then I made top 5 and they didn't call my name, I was like, "Oh, well, that's okay." So I'm standing there looking around, and they say my name, and I'm still looking around like, "Who won?" Like, other girls are, like, crying, when they win, and they're like that moment.
Right.
I'm sitting there like with my mouth open wide. So my shot of I have a picture of someone crowning me and me just standing there with my mouth open like,
Oh my god, that's so funny and so realistic.
well, and I think that that's what was the beginning of me understanding, "Wait a second, why did I limit myself?" And it was an amazing journey because that's when I think I emceed events. I started going to, I interviewed all the time. I put myself in rooms where I was the only one, and I remember afterwards, I didn't think I had like a $35 dress. Some of the girls, even back then, they weren't that fancy, but there were a couple girls that moms were like, they came out and like this was like they were training for like Miss Teen USA, which is a little bit more glam, and they had like these ball gowns with like things on them, and they had been training, and they were all friends, and they all talked to each other, and I was like this girl from Cerritos, like, "Okay, hi," and they're like, "Oh, hi," and they were nice, but the moms had like really trained them, and I was just like, "Okay, whatever," and so when I won, they all came up to me, they're like, "Oh," and I was like, they didn't even notice me before, and so it was
Oh,
the first time they weren't mean, it's
right,
just there was
right.
this energy of, like, I didn't exist, and then when
Yeah.
I won, I existed, and it was very interesting to
Yes.
learn at a very young age of how to navigate environments at 16 years old, so I grew up really fast, and I think it was one of those shaping factors, but I think for anyone listening, it's not about the pageant, it's all of us have that moment where you grow up a little bit and you put yourself in situations, whether you're a competitive athlete or you did speech competitions and that's why it's so important to test out the waters and put yourself in situations that you're not used to, that you may not know what will happen, because that's how I learned and that's how I grew and started to peel back all those layers.
Yes, yes. And there's something so profound about this that when you discover that I really am the only in this arena, that is your superpower. You lean into that and own it. And it's like it's just the best feeling ever when you have that aha moment. Tell us about, the 5 principles that you discuss in The Power of the Only, because they're all very varied, and I think we, can see ourselves in each of those chapters.
Yes. Well, and that's what I wanted to do. So when I decided, it started about 6 years ago. I got this idea of like there's power in being the only because people kept asking me my story. And I said, well, when I was the only this and the only, woman keynote speaker or the only this in that room. And they go, yeah, I'm the only two. And I said, and there's power in that. And then we looked at each other and there was this moment where I was like, there's power in that. And I've always felt a certain way. I know it's hard, it's difficult. It's not saying that it's easy. It's not saying that, oh, it's so great. It's saying that, like, wow, why do I feel this way? And then people that come to me that struggle with a lot of things say, I can't do that. I can't say that. I can't go there. I can't enter that. And I've always wanted to know, and I know why, because we're conditioned not to, and there's other things that happen. But I wanted to know why some people feel the power of the only and some don't. And I knew why. So I had these 5 principles. And then I spent the last 4 or 5 years interviewing onlys to see if there was a through line. And so the through line that I found is I validated what I thought. So I created my own, principles. And then I went and gathered stories of, is this actually true? Was it the way you're raised? Is it the way you think? Did you condition it? What did you do? What did you study? How did you shift your mindset? And so the principles really are starting with owning your opportunity and owning your opportunity, owning your power, owning your voice, owning your communication, and owning your future, and moving from survival to thriving. And when I mean own your opportunity, it's not just the opportunities that are in front of you, it's owning the opportunity when someone says you can't. You're not
Yeah.
supposed to. We're not supposed to think that way. And owning your power is knowing that you already have it, right?
Mhm.
That you don't have to find it externally, even though, of course, we want it, that you already have a certain amount of power and how to execute that. Owning your voice is not just using your voice, it's knowing that you have your voice, same thing already, and that what you say to yourself and what others say to you matters and how you shape that internal voice. And owning your communication is actually exactly what I teach in my communication training as a coach. I think in order to amplify all those things, you have to know how to communicate, but you also know how to connect with people. Right. And how to connect so that you're actually heard. And that moves the power of the only forward. And the last part that's so amazing is that in order for us to own the future, all the things that we did, owning your voice, owning your power, all that is exhausting. And unless we move from a survival to a thriving mindset, we can't keep doing things the same way. We will burn out. And so, what are the tools that we need to protect our energy? What are the tools and resources we need to continue to thrive in any environment? Because being an only is tough, right? I call it the power of the only, but we have to protect that energy as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I love it. I love that you gave us a synopsis of everything, and then we can kind of, as we read through it, see how you add color to each of these principles. I want to just kind of deep dive into a few of them. In Own Your Opportunity, I want to actually talk about the landscape that we're in now and how, so many. Um, Thought leaders, executives who were the only, or especially those who are in DEI positions, all of that has been cut. And and the world keeps changing in this way, not just through political leadership, but we have recessions, we have inflation, we have downsizing companies where tech behemoths are constantly doing layoffs, whatever it may be. So how do you safeguard yourself when
Mhm.
these circumstances come your way, and being the only might just actually get you on the chopping block?
Yes, definitely. So I'm actually going to New York actually to MC the Catalyst Awards, and the Catalysts are champions of workplaces that are really championing inclusion. But it's a very interesting time, right? Because there's a lot of executive orders that legally they have to navigate around. And so what I want to tap into is that we can use labels, we can use words, we can navigate around legally, but internally we have to remain the same, right?
Yeah.
I don't care
Yeah.
what we call it, right? It's ultimately, and so you're talking about the reality of it. And so I think internally we need to stop focusing on the words. And I am going to continue to do the same work that I've always done. And
Mm,
I always have never called it, I'm a communication coach. I don't do diversity work. But when I
yeah.
show up into a room, it is diversity and inclusion. When I show up on that stage, it is diversity and inclusion because I'm not going to not talk about my story. I'm not going to not bring my Chineseness to the table. And so I think that what's happening, of course, in corporate, if you're a head of DEI, you have to navigate those environments. And they must have a very difficult position right now because, on paper, if you work for a corporation, you have to do what's legally not going to get red flagged or whatever. So you have to do that. But the work that you are internally doing and aligning your company, I think we have to be really hopeful because there's a lot of companies that still are aligning and doing great things, just calling it different things. We can fit inside the parameters. I mean, I don't know if that answers your question, but I just think that we need to remain hopeful and not shift the things that we believe in. Inclusive environments are successful. It has nothing to do with the letters. Let's forget the acronym in general. But when you create communities of belonging, it doesn't matter if it's race, gender, all the different things, but it is more productive. It works better for your organization. So if leaders can continue to show up as the leaders they need to be to run their specific organizations and create cultures that work, the other things will happen. But the people that are advocating for certain diversity and inclusion issues need to stay strong and stay firm in where they stand, right? And I don't really call it a label. I have not changed the way that I'm doing things, but obviously if you work in corporate, you have to be a little more careful, but I think we have to realize there's so much community around, and women, we have made lots of progress, and we have to keep moving forward and not using it as like, "Oh my gosh, all is ruined." But we do have to fight. There's a lot of things that are on the table that are very real that we have to continue to show up for, but we also need to not we have to remain hopeful and keep doing the things we're doing.
Yes, I 100% agree. I think, there's one element where people are thinking of checking a box, but if as a company, as an individual, and even a parent, if you say that this is actually a core value, this is the culture of this home, this company, this community, this is our culture, then there's no breaking that. There's no like, "Oh, we can't do that anymore." It's actually how it runs. So I completely agree.
And I do wanna honor people that say, we kinda skipped ahead, but, like, I have a whole chapter on discernment because there does come a time where sometimes things don't work, right? And if they don't work, but when you are aligned internally and when you have your own power of the only, you have agency to choose. And I know sometimes and your agency could be choose that it's not my fight today. The agency could be, I'm going to stay, but this is not what I want to do because maybe other reasons. Not everyone can just a lot of entrepreneur groups I'm in, they say, just burn the boats, just leave and do this. But not everyone has the luxury to do that. So the reality is we have to stay strong internally and then we have discernment to figure out what works for me, for this environment that I'm in, for this company I'm in at the time.
Yes. Now I want to talk about owning your voice. And I know this is something that you've had to do in your career and definitely in the newsroom. So can you share how you found your voice as you were just charting your career as an anchor?
Yeah, what's interesting is that there's layers to that, right? So when I was a shy Asian girl with a bowl cut riding around on a big wheel, I didn't know my voice. I just wanted to own a bike, right? And then as I got older and I didn't have my teenage years were actually lovely. My high school friends were good. I actually had found my voice. And I think the pageant had something to do with that is that taking those little small things. When the first time my seventh grade English speech teacher said, "You should enter a speech competition." I was like, "What? No, not me." So at that point, I don't think I owned my voice. And then I tried it and it worked out. And so I was like, "Oh, so one piece doesn't mean I fully own my voice, but that piece I'm like, "Oh, okay, I can do that." And then you keep growing and growing. And then I think for years, even as a TV news wannabe reporter in the early years, I had to fake it a little bit. I owned my voice because obviously I owned my voice or I wouldn't have put myself into those positions or even tried for those jobs, but I didn't fully own my voice. I remember I had a celebrity voice coach when I had made it to Los Angeles. And I was like, okay, I've made it. So now I want to make network or I need to figure out what, I'm supposed to do. I'm in the big time now. So I went to this voice coach and he looked at me and he's like, "Do you own your voice?" I was like, "Excuse me?" I was like, "Aren't you going to teach me something?"
Yeah.
He's like, "How?" And he says, "Does being an Asian woman affect your voice?" And I said,
Hmm.
"Excuse me? What do you mean?" What he was trying to get at was my inner voice. And I had never done any personal development work prior to that. I had never, now I do neuroscience and coaching and all that. But when I was 27 years old, all I knew was work hard, get to the top, right? Get the job,
Yeah.
work hard, do whatever it needs. And when he started talking about, well, what do you think? Do you take up space? Do you believe that you have, to own that space. And I was like, what is he talking about? I just, I'm on TV already. I'm already, a reporter. And so for the first time, I was like, wow, maybe I don't. And so for the first time, I even thought about my inner barriers. And so I
Yeah.
think that's important and that's why even in the book, I talk about how to own your voice, why we don't own our voice, and then how do you do it? Because I think in the past, everyone's just like, own your voice, be more confident, just show up. I did it. You can too. And I don't think it's that easy. It's actually taking a look at why don't we? And then being aware of it. Then we can start, moving forward. So for the first time in that meeting, I realized like, wow, I do have voices from my parents. I do not.
Mm,
He's like, "You need to slow down, you need to pause." And so I always felt like I was in a rush, right? Because it's hard to take up space. So part of owning your voice is knowing that you have one, and being aware of what your barriers are is the first step into overcoming that. And so for the first time when I saw those barriers, I was like, "Ah, I do that. Ah, being an Asian woman actually does, because my parents told me to not rock the boat, to not speak up. Every time I was too loud, they would say something. And so I have an automatic barrier to not owning my voice, even though I'm on TV, even though I'm getting speech. So we just have to be aware of how we were raised and how we are wired, and then do it anyway."
yes, yes. Oh, I love that. I love that. Do you have any insights for those of us who are parents and want to help our kids own their voices? Because I feel like there's so much cycle breaking going on. We all have some form of generational trauma. It's just part of it.
Yes.
So, yes, as much as our parents' voices, limiting beliefs seep into our heads and our memories, we have to make sure that we don't repeat those mistakes, take the wisdom and the good stuff, pass that
Yes.
on. So yeah, any insights there on how you're, helping your kids find their
Yeah.
voices?
I love how you said that, right? And I do believe in honoring our past. I think I am shaped by my immigrant parents, and I
Hmm.
think that's a thing when I was younger I'd push away. It was like I didn't wanna be Chinese. Why do I have to translate for them? And my parents speak English. I mean, they're fully functioning great, but I mean, there's still certain things that I was the bridge builder for, and I would deny that part of myself, and now I embrace it. It's part of my strength. And so I love how you say what didn't serve you, you can let go of. There's some lessons that
Yeah.
are so valuable from my culture and my parenting that I want to put into my, work ethic, respect, showing up, as you are, honoring your family, all those things are important. But then there's those other things of scarcity, immigrant mindset,
Hmm.
showing up, letting them be free as to who they are, not controlling them as much is super important. So we get to choose now that we're older what parts, but I think we should embrace it all, but then we get to choose what parts we bring back. And although
Yeah.
I can't say that I'm a parenting expert by any means, because I have 2 teenagers right now, and every level you go through, it's a whole learning curve, and then you face new challenges. So for my kids, it's interesting about owning your voice. I started my podcast, like, I don't know, 5 years ago, and I have these pictures that I brought up since I've been writing the book. It's a sketch that my daughter made of me at a podium, and it says, "Own your voice, own your power." And I was like, "Wow," and it's literally me
Oh,
standing there, and in the back, it also says, "Be quiet, be quiet." So it's funny. So your kids are watching. That's the lesson that I want, right? She learned the good lessons and also
yes.
the lessons of me going, "Shh." It was during
Yeah.
the pandemic, and I think she was 10 at the time. She's 15 now. And she gave me this picture, and I still have it, and I looked at it, I'm like, "Wow, that was 5 years ago." And so for our children, the only thing we can do, they are watching and they are listening. And I never realized how much my young child was, because I did my podcast, I transitioned from news, she'd see me come in and out, I'd wear, like, from different conferences. One time she made a video of, like, she's like, "I'm gonna tell you that you shouldn't hurt yourself. Don't talk bad to yourself. Don't hurt yourself." And what
That's
she meant is, like, she meant, like, when I say your negative voices in your head, but the way she said it, I have this
yes.
video of her, I think she's, like, 8. She's like, "And when you don't believe in yourself, don't hurt yourself. Be nice." And it was just the funniest thing at 8.
Wow. Yes,
So
no
she
negative self-talk. She got it. She
but
understood
she
the
got it,
assignment.
but in her own way. But I have
Yes.
to tell you, she's 15 now, and she doesn't talk to me the same way. She's like, "Oh, cool,
Um,
mom, you wrote a book."
yeah.
And so you have to believe that it's all in there, because I'm navigating new territory, and my teenager is amazing, to other people. She
Yeah,
is
yeah,
amazing. But, we get into it sometimes, and I'm trying not to put into those pieces. I was like, "Oh," you get really triggered if you're a
yeah.
teenage mom, and
Mhm.
if you guys are in that zone where you have younger kids, you're just busy keeping everything together. You're just
Right.
busy trying to get through day to day, the activities, the schedules, the feeding, whatever it is. And then you
Ugh,
move into this zone where they're kind of self-sufficient, and it's nice. The time where she made that video and listened to you and repeated, like, the 8, 9, 10, where they're just these lovely people, where they do listen to you. And then you move into a phase where they don't listen to you, but we have to trust that it's in there.
Yes, yes, clearly, I mean, especially if your friends can vouch for this, she is a stand-up, young lady of the world, and so
Yes.
she's all good. But yeah, there's gonna be some pushback, it's so inevitable, and we did that shit to our parents too.
I know, and you know what? And it's really hard, I have to tell you. I've spent to be honest, as a mom podcast, I cry in my closet sometimes. It's
Oh,
really, really hard.
yeah,
It's really
yeah,
hard. And
yeah,
you go from highs and, you're out there doing things and you're juggling your life and you're juggling your kids and you're doing all these things for them, but sometimes it's just hard, and it's
totally.
okay.
And that's
And it's different stages,
yes.
right? When the early mom phase, I had that crying in the early mom phase, breastfeeding. If you guys are in that phase,
Mhm,
it's
mhm.
okay, it will pass. But, where I was just, I had the baby, like, was it breastfeeding pillow around my waist? I was
Yeah,
like making
yeah.
my website. I was like writing a blog and I was like, what's happening to my life? This is like, 10 this is like 10, 15 years ago. Now they're teenagers, and now it's different. It's another new
Yeah.
stage that I'm learning, and so
Mm.
parenting is a very interesting, and it's the best personal development growth process you could ever do, and you have to excavate sometimes some of your past a little bit to heal it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanna use this as a segue to get into your pivot because I think, when you are an only, sometimes you're an only because you've pivoted into something brand new and you're having to face that fear head on. And you and I have done this. I wanna just bask in the nostalgia for a little bit. Like when we were in news, we learned how to one woman band and had our resume tapes and sending them in everywhere to stations and it was great. But I think every industry is ever evolving and now we're in just the beginning of an AI revolution. So yeah, we knew that it was like, okay, is this sustainable long term? And if we are now going to be parents, like how can we still be in media, but then not be
Mhm.
on call for the news director and the station? Because we can't. We have like too much. We can't be in two places at once.
Yes.
So tell us about your pivot because I love that you did it too.
Yes, well, I love my news career. It's everything I work for, and there are a lot of crazy stories in there, and the people that have survived and continue to work till this day, my LA news friends, I left the business years ago, and they're still just doing the work,
Wow.
right?
Wow.
And
Yes.
but I've spent years, so I recalibrated, but the news industry back then, it taught me so much. I will trust news person anytime to handle anything at any moment, right? Because you're like, what do we got? Let's do just you're fast, you're quick, and you get it. So my tribute to all the journalists out there. As far as my pivot, I left because I'd reached the pinnacle of my career in Los Angeles and I became a news anchor here in San Diego and I started my family. And I remember being on air. I was pregnant. It was during the fires. And I remember telling people to evacuate, and then we had to evacuate. And then I had my son and I was working and my contract was up. And I just kind of thought, you know what? I've been waking up at 2, 3 a.m. for years. I'd made it to the top, I'd done all the things, and I would have kept going. But the station was kind of like, it was okay. It was going to be bought out. I was like, oh, are they going to it was starting to be in that change where are they going to have like 10 hours of news and just make me do like all of them?
Yeah.
Right? It was when I had a 4-hour live morning show and I loved it because I did hard news. I interviewed people. I had 4 or 5 guests a day. We had musical acts. It was wonderful. But then now, if you look at it, they have like 7 hours of news. It starts at like 3 a.m. I don't know. It's 4 a.m. I started, my show was 5 to 9, 4 hours. Now it's like
Wow.
3 to 9 or something, right? It's still a long time. And
Yeah.
so I just thought, you know what? I kinda wanna move into this phase. I had some hosting gigs. I was like, "You know what? I'm gonna speak." I was already kind of speaking a little bit, but I wasn't getting paid for it because that was all volunteer. I'm like, "You know, I'm gonna speak. I'm gonna learn about this whole those when the internet and everything was going." And I'm like, "You know what? I'm just gonna take a break for a little while, and then I'll go out for hosting gigs." I'm close to Los Angeles. And so I just stopped working. And my contract was up, and I just decided it was time to pivot.
That is so ballsy. I love it. I love it because yeah, you have to know when to, it's like, okay, I'm quitting while I'm up.
And you know what? And I could have kept going if I felt there was maybe more stations. I mean, it wasn't a bad thing. It was just that
Right.
there wasn't a lot of, like, I didn't see a lot of growth there. Like, the station was owned
Yes.
by a station that didn't care as much. Local news is interesting, and I'd
Yeah.
moved from LA to San Diego, and San Diego is a little different, and I was
Yeah.
used to, like, larger markets, but it was totally fine. It was great, but I was like, "You know what? I just want to not wake up at 3 AM in the morning." And so
Yeah.
but then it was a hard pivot because it was like, "Oh, so do I work
You're
out
still up
now?"
at 3, but doing something else.
Yeah, yeah. I'm like, do I join a mom group? Like, what's happening?" And so it was a whole new journey of
Oh,
new motherhood, and I enjoyed it, but it was completely different. And then but at every night, I would be building my website. I was watching videos. I was doing, learning online. This is before there was no Instagram. This is like when Facebook pages were just starting. This was like 10, 15 years. This was 15 years ago. This is before Facebook, right? So I did the LinkedIn, Facebook. I started social media. I learned all about marketing online and coaching, and then I started writing my keynote better. And I was a mom blogger for a while. Like, instead of podcasting back then, it was blogs. And so I had a mom blog for several years. And then as my kids got older, it's like I didn't really go into that to be a mom blogger. It was really just about I continued to write, I continued to interview people. And it's when vlogs were coming in, and it was all new. Now this is like simple. We have our own equipment, but back then nobody had their own equipment. I was used to having people and sets and different
yes.
things. And people would say, "No, just talk into the camera." I'm all talking to my
But where's my
camera, and this is
wait.
before camera phones. I had a special thing by Kodak. It was like a video camera that I would do vlogs in, and so technology just keeps changing. So now any of us can have our own platforms. And I love that, I did a book launch the other day. I did a live show through StreamYard where I brought in like chyrons, I brought in people, I could pull in comments, I could put in sound effects. I basically can produce my own show from home, which is a completely different evolution. But the pivot was hard. And I think he wanted me to get to this is that for a few years, even though I was going, 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 I did the exact same thing I left, which is I left the business so that I have more time and space, and I filled it with blogging, vlogging, staying up late. I didn't actually have more time because I would parent all day and I would work all night. Not all night, but and I had a breakdown. I mean, I really was like, I don't wanna do any of it. I don't wanna parent. I don't wanna do the blog. I don't wanna do anything, and I had to have a really this is when I started diving into personal development again. I really had to have a breakthrough, and I realized that I was chasing external status when what I needed to build was internal status. And so even in the book, I talk about this. You can own your power of the only, but anytime you go through a transition, sometimes you feel like you're starting from zero, and you're not starting from zero. Everything you've ever done up until this point in your life, just because your career shifts, your role shifts, you move into new motherhood, it doesn't go away, even if it feels like it. And so I had to learn the hard way. I was chasing, 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 and then I realized, "Oh my goodness, I'm trying to recreate my old career when the whole point was I was leaving that to create something else." And so I never sat down with myself and decided, "What do I want? What do I stand for? Who am I? Why am I doing this?" And that is where You Amplified came from. It wasn't just a communication coaching. It was like, who am I? What do I stand for? What am I going to spend my energy doing? And I think all of us need to do that every 4 or 5 years of recalibrating your life stage with your goals. And it doesn't mean you can throw away your old stuff, and it's all there with you. And so I also have a bunch of exercises in the book to help people step into their self-power in stages of transition too.
I love that you help your clients own their voice and their communication strategy and become compelling keynote speakers like you. And so many of my listeners, I feel like, are leaders in their own right. So, can you give us tangible takeaways on
Yeah.
how they can just be better speakers, keynotes?
Yes. Yeah. Well, there's 3 things I wanna talk about. First of all, when we talked about this, is if people have that feeling, right, that energy, they always say like, "Oh, well, I have to I'm not good because I have to get rid of that feeling," or I get fear. I fear that, or I get
Yes,
scared before I go on. I get really
stage
nervous, I
fright.
get really sweaty.
Yeah.
We don't need to get rid of it. It's you have to honor it and channel it, because that energy doesn't always go away. I still get those butterflies. I still get that feeling. And that feeling is the energy you need to do the big things you need to do in the world. So we need to shift it from something that we need to push away and fear. And it's more the energy that you need to be able to show up fully. And something else, and I think it's important, and that's that mindset shift, right? And allows you that energy to project in the way that you want and show up with your message. Another way to break through that fear is also to think about what the audience wants. There's this study that I wrote about. It's called the spotlight effect. And it's that we think people notice us more than they actually do. And that people really aren't paying. I mean, when you're on stage, they are paying attention. But the little things that you kind of tear yourself apart about, people may not be noticing as much as you want if you show up fully to serve and if you believe in your message. If you show up fully to serve and believe in your message, the little things don't matter as much because you're focused on what the audience wants. So the number one thing to be a good speaker is, what does the audience need? What are they thinking about? How are they feeling? How can you serve them? What are the things they need, right? You could be the most polished, perfect speaker if you don't think about what the audience needs and kind of talk directly to them and serve them, and you're too busy thinking about, what do my slides look like? What do I look like? You're going to be detached. So that's how
Right.
you connect. And an
Yes, yeah,
actual another tangible thing that people can do, and I talk about using your commas and your periods.
love it.
Yeah, and that goes back to, I think you know what I'm talking about, is that, I'm a natural fast talker, and we could talk really fast because it's fun and we're chatting and all that. But if you're actually speaking on stage, you have to speak to the tone of the environment, right? It's okay to talk fast, right? If another person's a fast talker, it's like, I got you, we can do it. But when you're on stage, you have to be able to take up space, right? And so when you take up space, it's like, when you walk on stage, do you just start talking? Like, do you, like, you don't land, right? When you walk on stage, if you notice some speakers, you can land, and silence is okay, right? So that's part of taking up space, is being okay with silence and using your commas and your periods. Meaning,
Oof.
so when you use your commas and your periods, you can change the inflection of your voice, so things that are more important. And then it also reminds you to take up space, because if you're comfortable with a pause or a period, then you own the room better.
Oh, that's
I hope
so,
that's
so
helpful.
wonderful. Absolutely, it is. Yes, and I think it's important that we own that, this pause, this full stop, because we know our keynotes, or if we're moderating our questions inside and out, but the audience is hearing it for the first time. So give them a beat, let them process what you just said. Do you think being a parent has made you an even more, compelling, powerful leader?
I think so. And for those who aren't parents, it's okay, it's a choice. But when you have, I talk to some of my friends and they're like, "Oh," sometimes they're like, "Why did I have children?" And I go, "You know what? It's such a special," and you're gonna feel like that sometimes, right? Depending
Yeah.
on
Oh,
what you're
yeah.
going through.
Totally.
It's like a natural feeling. Doesn't mean you don't want to. But I think it's such a special experience. I think, for men and women, when men
Mm,
become fathers, you see the world differently. You understand, there's this empathy that comes with it, and the support. You take on different roles. For women, it completely shifts because hormonally we shift. I
yes.
mean, there's
Yes.
things that I think about or want to do. You completely shift. When I became a mother, I think it's a natural thing too, is that I saw things in a completely different light. I think that's why I created You Amplified. It's like, if I'm
Mhm.
going to work that hard, who am I? What do I believe in? And what is it for? Right. And we start stepping into who we are. And then every layer we peel back. And then it becomes where you start to understand and you start to see the world. You appreciate things more. I would say, when I was wanted to be a TV news anchor at the top of my career, I don't know that I covered all these amazing stories, but my goal was like, get to the top. Versus now, I'm like, how can I serve here? What's going on there? Why doesn't that work? We need to do something about that. And I think that comes a lot with parenting. And you can still be that way even if you're not a parent, but I think there is
Right.
a shift. And I love being at the airport, and it's like you can just look at a mom and you're like, I got you.
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
got you. Like, I don't need to relive all the I'm not in the same baby zone as some
Mhm.
people are at that time, but I know I know exactly what they're going through, and it's good to support any mom out there with whatever they're going through. If you've been through that stage before, it gives you total empathy.
Oh my god, I completely relate. Oh, I love it, I love it, and it just you feel so seen, and it just it's wonderful to be able to pay it forward because I still think of all the moms that helped me, it's like, "Thank you so much for watching this one while I'm changing this one."
I just remember, like, I have teenagers now, so I look like the single mom in the airport, like, I travel for work, and I'm like, I'm sitting there, I'm like, on my phone, or I'm reading, or I'm doing something, and I see this poor mom with, like, 5 bags and, like, a baby Bjorn and a stroller, and that was me. That was
That
me.
was
My makeup wasn't done, my hair wasn't a tie, I had a baby, my kids are
like
22 months
wearing
apart.
one. Yeah,
I had
yeah,
a
yeah.
baby Bjorn, and then I had the other stroller, and then I had to fold it up at the airport, and then we had, like, carry the, like, car seat backpack, and when I see
Oh,
moms, like, one time, I think last week I saw a mom with, like, a car seat on her back and a stroller and then, like, 2 kids, and I'm like, "Oh, girl." Like, that was me, and I'm like, "I'm so sorry." I didn't say anything, I was just like, if she needed help, I would help her, but,
yeah,
we all have those moments, so if you're going through that right now, I've been there, but I've
yes.
also been the glam mom in the airport that looks like I have no children, but I just
Right.
it's just a different stage.
It's a different stage, yes, hold out, just hold out for it, and you will get
Yeah.
to the other side, don't worry. Do you have any mom sense moment that you can pinpoint? And, by that, I mean, a time where you really trusted your intuition.
Mm. Mom sense. I believe in intuition a lot, and I always trust my mom sense, and I think with my children, it's just staying true to what you believe in. Like, with whether it's with phones or with things, it's like, well, they're not everyone's doing this. Everyone's doing this, like, nope, this is what I feel deep inside. I was the mom that, even with screens or different things, I don't follow the path, right? I don't follow what everyone else is like, "Well, everyone's doing this." I'm like, "It's okay. This is what we're doing." And so I think you should always follow it wasn't a specific moment, it was the only in that way, right? I would always do things I wouldn't make it difficult or make other people wrong, but I chose very consciously to do certain things, um, for my kid. Like, my son was very sensitive, to noise and all that, and I remember when I was young, a younger mom, they would take, their kids to the movies. But my son didn't like loud noises and didn't sleep and cried, and no one could understand, "Well, why don't you just take him to a movie? He wouldn't pay attention." I'm like, "No, no, it's not." And my kid was just sensitive to noises, and I knew that, right? So I was like, "No, I'm okay." And so I would schedule something else. And then when it got older, it's like a lot of people had phones when they were in 6th grade, and I was like, "Nope, it's not good for your brain. I'm not gonna do that." And then a lot of other people were like, "Oh, well, you have to sign them up for these 15 things or it's not gonna work out, or you have to do this and you have to do that." I'm like,
Says
I'm
who?
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that for whatever I did, I was always tried to keep really true to what I believed in and not get swayed, and it's hard, right? Because your whole neighborhood's doing it, or if "Oh, my kid's gonna be left behind, everybody's doing it." But I always was that odd odd mom out without making other people wrong, right? Because you can be the odd mom out and be like, "No, you guys have to do it this way," and so that's my mom sense. I think that you can stay firm in exactly who you are, what you believe in, just by showing up that way, but without making other people wrong about it, right? Like, I wouldn't be like, "Oh, so horrible, that's horrible." No, it's not horrible, I'm just not going to do it. I'm that's not what we do, and that was totally fine. Like, my friend could do it, but I don't need to do it. And even, like, with my kids, it was like, yeah, like, even with the activities, it's interesting. My daughter did competitive dance, and I didn't wanna be gone every weekend. I didn't do it early. Eventually, she did do competitive dance, but I was like, "Can we do 1 class, and then we do 3 classes?" And then when they get a little bit older and said, "This is definitely what I wanna do," but I didn't wanna give up, everything for them,
Right,
like,
right.
but eventually they got really competitive. So my son did play competitive soccer and my daughter did competitive dance, and then when they told me I don't wanna do it anymore, we didn't, but it was okay on our timeline.
Yes, yes. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, that's so wonderful. That's exactly what Mom Sense is about. It's just trusting that inner voice, and there's going to be a lot of noise. A lot of people are going to say, "What about this? What about that?" And it's like, yeah, don't just tune it out because you know what's
Yes.
what, and you know your kids better than anybody else.
Yes, right? You have to trust your mom sense. When I was early in my new mom, I didn't trust my mom sense. As a new mom, I tried all the things, right? I read all the books. I did all the things. I was like a journalist, right, with parenting. And then I realized 2 years later, I was like, I didn't need to do all that stuff. Right?
Yeah,
I was
it's
like, "Wear
true.
your baby, don't wear your baby, do this, do that." No, I did all the things, and I was like, I was exhausting. Why did I do all that? I should
Yes,
have just stuck with but you have to go through that learning curve. And so I'm
totally,
not saying
totally.
that I always was the one that could stand up and say everything. There was a learning curve where I just did all the things. People handed me a book. I thought, "Wow, that must be the way to do it." There's lots of books on parenting, and there you have to choose which way works for you.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And where can the audience find you and support you and get your book?
Oh, thank you. So you can find me on angelachee.com, but the book is poweroftheonly.com. It has all the information. But really, we've covered so many great things, but ultimately, I just want people to see the brilliance inside them. My parents were Chinese immigrants and they didn't always have a voice, and other people around the world don't always have a voice. And I think we need to continue to show up fully, but not just use our voices, but really, I talked about thriving in any environment because it's hard being the only one. It's
Yeah.
hard being a parent, right? Navigating all the things, juggling the things, and we're so hard on ourselves. And so, how can we continue to thrive? So, that's why the other half of the book is really a lot of healing tools, a lot of exercises of really how we can move in and protect our energy because there's a lot of stuff going on in the world. And some of it is ours to carry, and some of it's not. And we have to be really, really careful moving forward that we show up fully and do all the things, but also protect our energy, right, for ourselves and our family. And I really just hope this book was a gift to all the onlys in the world and a roadmap filled with all kinds of stories from other people as well, not just me, and science backed strategies. So I really, really hope that it helps people.
Oh, it absolutely will. I thoroughly enjoyed reading it, and I'm just so proud of you. Congratulations on
Oh, thank
this
you
and
so
so
much.
many other wins to come. And this is something that your inner voice intrinsically is like, just yes, celebrate this. This is such a moment.
Oh, I appreciate you so much and all that you're doing and the stories that you bring alive. It's truly been an honor.
Thank you, Angela. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of That's Total Mom Sense. You can listen to the audio version wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for That's Total Mom Sense. You can learn more about my guests by logging on to www.thatstotalmomsense.com. Be sure to follow me on Instagram, where I'm most active on social media. My handle is at Kanika Chadda Gupta. And if you have ideas for show topics or guests you can't wait to have on the show, write to me at thatstotalmomsense@gmail.com. And lastly, please rate, review, and subscribe to That's Total Mom Sense if you haven't already. Thanks for being in my tribe.